Well, let's get back to this old truck. And next step, we want to refurbish the rear end. And what that meant was we needed to I wanted to replace the pinion bearing, the pinion seal and the two axle seals. And when I opened it up a while back, I realized there was an open rear end. Really wasn't wanting an open rear end, was wanting a posi. As I thought of a one-wheel burnout. Now that's a little embarrassing. I kind of wanted to get a posi system if I could, but financially, it just wasn't a priority. So moved on, didn't worry about it too bad. But then when I was pulling the axle seals out of both sides of the diff, I accidentally nicked one of the axle bearings. There's a little bearing. It's not a carrier bearing. There's a small bearing between the carrier bearing and the axle seal where the half shaft rides on. And it was that bearing actually that I nicked when I was trying to pull out the seal. And those bearings are pretty fragile, as it turns out, because I didn't hit it very hard at all. And it basically quit turning. And so decided to pull those bearings, and to pull those bearings, I felt like the best way was to go ahead and pull the gears. And then I figured if I've got the gears down, let's talk about going ahead and redoing it with a posi. So it's kind of a snowball downhill. So it was a 327, was happy with the 327. Could have stood a little taller gear. I thought with a 6-speed, we'd still get good cruise, low cruise RPM. And so ended up going with a 355 gear posi, and it's on its way. I got it ordered day ago, and it'll be here hopefully midweek next week. That's another 3 or 4 days, and then we'll start putting this thing back together. I still need to clean up a little inside the chunk where it's just got some oil remnants, some crusty remnants in there. But otherwise, yeah, we're going to learn how to rebuild the diff. It's not terribly hard, but it is a bit meticulous and takes a fair amount of patience. So that may mean we don't succeed, but we're going to try. I think the concept's pretty well out there. Many people have put out resources on the internet, video as well as documentation. We're going to make use of some of those and get this thing rebuilt. Moving on. Now it's time to get onto the gas tank until such time as we have rear gears, and then we'll get on that. So here's what we're dealing with for a frame. We're going to go ahead and drop it in between the frame now and inside the frame this direction, and see how that works out. And then once we do that, we'll install this rear cross member, at least temporarily, and see how it's all going to fit up. Looks like it's going to fit up so far. Let's see how it goes. Alright, so the frame's done and installed. Basically, it's just a square 1-inch tube frame. The tubes here and here go all the way to the frame edge, inside frame, and then there's some tabs welded there we're going to bolt onto the frame once we get going. So it's in there. Let's mock up the gas tank, see what it looks like. Alright, so we got the gas tank mocked up in here inside the frame. It's just sitting in there with a jack holding it in place, so it's it's crooked and whatever. But just making sure that the alignment's there, that fits there. A couple of uncertainties: how high does the tank need to be in order to get the fill spout to work out in the bed, the wood of the bed fine. That'll be flexible. We can adjust that as we go. Also, obviously, we're not going to actually put the frame into and get the truck down and level. It doesn't have to be perfectly level, but we don't want it severely tilted one direction or the other. Just lose suction too fast. But again, the holes in the middle, the fuel pump hole, which is there on the far side, it's in the middle of the tank this way. So a little bit of uneven is not going to be a train wreck. But we'll wait and secure it in the frame only after we get it down on wheels and can level the frame up. What else we got? Right now the tank's just being held up by a jack holding it in place. We're going to put straps across the top, one on each side, and then we'll secure it from the bottom with the flexible straps that go there. Right now we're going to go ahead and take the tank back out. We're going to do some 415 cleanup on the tank, 415 this frame, 415 the differential, which we showed you earlier, the differential pinion flange, things like that. Do a little bit of touch up 415 where these jack stands have been. We're going to relocate those, and we just want to do some finish up work on the 415. So a lot of uncertainty still. I mean, rear cross member, how do these holes align with mounting holes, the bumper holes? We probably have to modify bumper brackets when we finally choose what bumper to run on this thing. There's a lot of little stuff like that. That's just life. We just deal with it as we go. So let's move on to the next thing. All right, so pretty much fully mocked up with the gas tank now, with the exception of the straps. That's pretty straightforward. Show you those probably in the next clip, but there'll be straps, 2 straps across the top, which will basically keep it from pushing out the top of the tank mounting frame, and then there'll be some more flexible straps underneath holding it in. So yeah, the tank mock-up's complete pretty much. I've got the rear cross member still clipped in there with some vice grips, and so soon we'll be drilling those holes. One of the things that's kind of a chore on an old truck like this, you took apart a year and a half ago, is figuring out what all the hole placements are for. You see there's a hole here. If I put this cross member here, if and when I go to bolt on fender, I'm going to have to deal with some interferences. I'm not sure if bed bolts hold through those holes right there, so we're going to have to we're going to have to kind of deal with it as we go and do our best in the meantime. Again, we could change bumper bracketing, we can change bed bolt hold downs. I mean, we just got to be flexible about this stuff. So it's looking good. We're going to go ahead and now start taking the tank back out and get this thing ready to be pour 15. Clean up the tank, which had some problems on the tank when I poured 15 the first time. We're going to drill holes in the tabs, get them ready to mount. Probably going to have to do some finagling when we ultimately put it in. And stop. Well, we are moving on now. If you didn't see it, feel free to go check out the Ford 8.8 rear differential rebuild. That's what that little monkey right there is. Got new gears, new carrier, new bearings, new seals, new. Pretty much everything but the housing's new. And got new bushings on it. You might be able to see them down there. Little red bushings. The front rear differential support bushings have been replaced, and it's mounted. So now we can start back together with it. I've already started back together with this side. Let me show you here real quick. I know I'm probably making a racket, but what you gonna do? So this side is all back together. The only thing left to do is torque the axle nut. Otherwise, that side's together. Also, I've got to tighten up all the bushing bolts. I want to get it down to right height bearing weight before I tighten the bushing bolts, so that you don't stress the rubber bushings by tightening them while it's up and then dropping it down. And yeah. Anyway, so we'll do that. Everything else is pretty much together. Got the emergency brake cable in. I don't have it hooked up over here yet. We'll get to that. The brakes are all hooked up and ready to go. Got the new line for the brake. I've got to figure out exactly where I want to terminate it. I believe in the Thunderbird it terminated on the frame, so I'll need to terminate it somewhere convenient on the frame. I don't believe it actually terminated on the IRS subframe, but I'm going to double check that. So now let me show you these hubs, which we had re-drilled. All right, so there's a look at the hub. The hub is pressed onto the knuckle. The backing plate is on the brake backing plate is on the hub, or on the knuckle. And you can see the extra holes. So that's taking us to from 5 on 4 1/4 to 5 on 4 1/2. And then we also had the rotor. The rotor drilled to match. So we are pretty well ready to go, it looks like. So we've got the other side together, and we're going to start putting this side together. Begin by sticking in the half shaft. All right, in order to get this half shaft installed, we're going to use a bungee cord. We're going to bungee this upper control arm, upper swing arm, whatever it is, out of the way. Absolutely in the way otherwise. And we've oiled the end of this shaft before we put it in. The shaft's 21 spline. Don't quote me, I don't know. So we're going to go ahead and install this up into the rear differential. Try to, being careful of the seal, and also being careful to get that line up. There it is. You can feel it engage the splines. Now for the fun part, let's push it in there. What I do on the other side is use a large bar to catch the edge of it. Now I'm not on the shiny parts, just on this part equivalent on the inside here. So it's in there. Now that that's in there, let's get the knuckle and hub assembly. If you wonder which is front, which one goes on which side, the brakes are toward the rear of the vehicle. So let me change my mind here. Before I do that, I want to grab my anti-seize. I like to anti-seize these splines on the hub, as this is not lubricated after install, so give it a little lubrication just to in case we ever have to take this back out. Maybe it'll come out a bit easier. So I love anti-seize function. I hate the mess it makes. All right, back to it. Also, we anti-seized all of the bushing bolts. They like to freeze up in there. All right, I think we're engaged. There we go. We're going to grab our bolts. And one of these, longer one, goes in the top. Two short ones go on the side, or in the lower, rather. In our case, we had to cut through one of the lower ones because it was seized. So we're having to use an aftermarket bolt. The bolts that original bolts are not available through Ford, so we had to make do. Let's put one here in the top. Get my bar. There we go. Get it close. Push down the swing arm. And then get the persuader. Be glad to get all this back together, get my tools sorted out, get this place cleaned up. There we go. So that one's in for now. And again, we're not going to tighten any of the bushing bolts. Move our bungee. We're going to tighten any of the bushing bolts until we get the what's it we got to do? Oh, until we get it bearing weight at right height, because it will trip your rubber if you don't do it carefully. All right. So the hub and knuckle are installed. Life is good. We got all these nuts started on here. And that bolt that we bought is longer. I'm going to cut it off. I didn't turn my, felt like it wasn't necessary. And it's not rubbing anything, so we're just going to leave it longer. Not a problem. Okay. Let's get on with it. And next thing we're going to do is, what's the next thing we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and assemble the brake drum, brakes, Ebrake cable, all those goodies. I may have mentioned it previously. I did take the aluminum backplate for the differential and the two knuckles and sandblasted them, and then covered them with some matte clear just to keep them from oxidizing. Hopefully keep them look half decent while we when we get this thing dirty. Right, on to other things. Alright, well that side's together and happy with it. The brakes are on, rotor's on, hub's on, everything's together. The half shaft is installed. Where is it? Right in there. And so everything's hooked to the rear. The rear's, everything spins fine. It's stiff. It's going to be stiff. It's brand new. Also hooked up the Ebrake cable. Let me show you here. The Ebrake cable comes to the middle of the subframe, the IRS subframe, and then there's a cable that hooks through here, hooks to there, and that pulls everything when you pull the main cable. Now the main cable, I was unable to get out of the car, and I got this IRS out of it, and so I'm ordered they have two stock cables. One of them's 90 inches long, the other one's basically 120 inches long. I got the 120 inch long one. I think we're going to actually, I'm hoping, we're going to be able to use the stock Ebrake handle that came in this truck and take that new Ebrake cable down under the cab, up in and through the firewall, and connect it to the existing Ebrake handle. Anyway, that's my goal. We'll see whether it works out or not. So we'll get to that when the part gets here next week sometime maybe. And for now though, we're going to get wheels on this thing, make it a roller again. I've got some new 5 on 4.5 wheels and tires. You can probably see here. That's one of the ones that was up on the front of the truck. And these are just throw-down tires. These have absolutely nothing to do with what's going to be on this truck when we're done. But it's just to keep it rolling. And that's about it. Anyway, so I'm going to get some tires on the back here. Make sure everything clearance is okay. Not sure if it will, honestly. A little worried about the subframe mount, but we'll give it a go and see what happens. Alright, talk to you later. Well, I'm glad to report the back end of this thing's starting to look like it should. Or what I hope it will. 5 on 4.25 wheels all the way around. That's a big start. I did notice that the lugs are just a little bit loose in the holes that they bored. And so I think I'm going to have to deal with that. In order to get the lugs out, I'm going to have to press the hubs back off the knuckles and pull them off the axles, all those goodies. I'm not really inclined to do that. So I think what I may do is basically bang them out till they're loose, put some red Loctite on them, and then draw them back in with a lug nut and a nut on the front. I'm not going to do it right now. I think next time I have the tires off, I'll tighten up those lugs in the hubs. Hubs have been quite the adventure. Suggestion, if you're doing this, well, here, let me tell you the reason I really had these drilled. I don't want to change and go to aftermarket brakes. Why? Well, this thing's not a racer, and two, rear brakes get used relatively small with a good proportioning valve, small amount, and aftermarket brakes, they're not cheap. If I went to a Mustang, what is it? If I go to an aftermarket hub, it's going to be a Cobra hub. That's what I'm trying to get to. And Cobra hubs are going to require larger rotor, which can require larger brakes, which means aftermarket brakes. I'm not saying you couldn't find something, putting pieces together that would work, but it's just a tail chase. So I stayed with these hubs, had them drilled. My suggestion, go buy an adapter plate. They've got 5 1/4 by 5 1/2, 5 by 4 1/4 by 5 by 4 1/2 adapters that you can buy, which would give you, you can bolt those on your existing hubs. It gives you a hole pattern. You can drill that hole pattern quite accurately at that point. I wish I'd have done that. I only thought about it after I turned these in to get them machined. You know, my concern was layout. It was getting everything symmetrical and, you know, without proper equipment. It's easy to do if you've got the proper equipment. But now I think about it, thought about it later, and thought, man, I could have bolted those adapter plates on, centered all my holes, drilled them on a drill press. Took a little time, burned through some bits, used up a ton of cutting oil, but we certainly would have got it done. We could have turned right around there and done the same thing on the hubs, on the rotors, excuse me. So, I have regrets. Life's full of them. But this is okay. We'll just Loctite those studs and suck it up and move on. It cost us more than I wanted on the hubs, but it didn't cost nearly as much as the whole transition to Cobra hubs and all the brake change requirements. So we're happy. Love it. Love the rear. I put some air in the airbags. I'd taken all the air out whenever I disassembled everything, and got some much smaller tires on the front. Again, they're car tires. They're just there to make us roll. She does roll good, which, I mean, you expect her to, right? She's just 4 wheels on the ground. So happy. Now we're going to move on to get the tank, finish installing the tank, and probably get the Ebrake cable installed as well while we're back here. Not necessarily hooked all the way up in the front, but at least in there. And then we'll move on to the next thing. Next thing's probably going to be the air management system, or it's going to be getting the brake lines plumbed, or whatever. Once the tank's in, we've got fuel lines to plumb as well. So plenty of work to do, plenty of work coming. Hang with me. Talk to you later. Bye.